Okay then, folks, here we go. So what I want to do now is to try and encourage you to turn your harmony starter or one of your harmony starters into a longer piece of music. And that's what we're going to look at here. I've written a longer piece, which is sort of based loosely on the quartal harmony idea. But what I also want to do is to try and talk you through the whole process of trying to write something that's more substantial. We can all manage, 8, 16, even 24 bars with relative confidence and ease now. But it's what happens once you've written those first bars, and you sort of get stuck after that first idea. Is what do you do next and how do you handle that? And I want to try and sort of help you with that as well through this little discussion about my piece that I've written. So the first thing I've always say and trying to encourage you to do is can you take some inspiration from an existing composition or existing piece of music as a starting point? Writing something brand new original is incredibly tough to do, even for a very experienced composer, and most of us are influenced by pieces of music that we've come across. So this is the first thing, is to be thinking about, well, this isn't just an exercise now in writing a few bars of harmony. This is an actual piece of music. Am I basing this on something that I know, or even just taking some hints of ideas from other pieces? So this is a piece for cornet and piano, which I recorded the piano part for Sarah Woodward, who is the director of senior band at Kirby. She wanted to play this piece in lockdown, and so I recorded the piano part, and I thought, cool, this is a nice piece. I might try and write my own version, if you like, of this piece. And so I started looking at what the piece does. So the first thing is that I just, make a note of the time signature and the key signature. So it's in F major, it's in 3/4, it's tranquillo con moto, so tranquil but with a bit of motion. And you can see it's sort of 3.5, 4 pages long, and that it's got a variety of sort of like different sections, but quite a lot of repetition as well. What I noticed is that it's got one particularly contrasting section from the rest of the piece, and that's the bit I've highlighted there. So the writing of that short section, not quite in the middle, but in middle-ish of the piece, is contrasting. I thought, okay, well that's an idea. Once I've squeezed loads of material out of my opening section, I'm going to have a totally contrasting idea in my piece, and that's nicked from this piece. The other thing is that there are quite a lot of piano interludes. I thought, well, that seems like a good idea. Piece for cornet and piano, give the cornet player a nice rest, and then you've got less melody to write because the piano's doing a lot of the work. So those are quite long piano interludes there. And that's about a third to a half of the piece is actually not got the cornet playing. So that's quite curious. What I think is going to happen now when I press the mouse next is that we're going to hear a little bit of that opening piano intro. The only thing here is I could not find a piano recording of this online, so it's actually brass band playing the accompaniment, but you can hear the difference between the brass band on its own and then the brass band with the cornet that we'll hear in a minute. So have a little listen to a bit of this. I think this is going to be piano, or well, actually brass band next. There you go. So you could hear that opening intro. It's a really beautiful piece, is this. Quite simple, slow moving, and that was that first sort of blue bracket of piano part. Next, what we've got here is a melody that uses quite a lot of anacrusis. So remember, that's a pickup where the melody starts not on the first beat of the bar, and those melodies with the little red circle are phrases that are all starting with an anacrusis. I thought, that seems like a good idea, so let's maybe think about nicking that. And then we've got the phrasing, and the sort of green bracket there shows that you've got pairs of 4-bar phrases. And I could have put green brackets around the whole of the rest of the piece because it all uses 4-bar phrases in pairs. So you get a sort of 4-bar phrase followed by an answering 4-bar phrase, giving you 8 in total. And the only time it doesn't do that is the very last phrase of cornet, just to wrap it up at the end. But that's kind of a pattern that happens So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you two more little bits of the music. So the first thing I think we're going to hear is the use of anacrusis and those 4-bar phrases. So this is the bit in the green bracket. And then following that, we're going to listen to the contrasting section, and you'll be able to hear how it does sound in style quite different from the rest of the piece. So that was from the upbeat to bar 11 with the anacrusis to the end of that first page of the score. And here is the contrasting section in the sort of purple boxes. And you can hear the style of that section is quite different, and then immediately goes back into the opening melody played louder. So that contrasting section provides that necessary contrast, and then it's straight back after it into something that we've heard before. So this is a piece of music that I really loved. I loved playing the piano part for it, and I thought, I'm going to write my own version. So now I started to think about making the basic decisions about my piece. How was I going to write it? What was I going to do? Were there any style things that I were going to include? And as I've already sort of alluded to, what was I going to pinch from elsewhere? So my borrowed ideas, as I've just pointed out, use of anacrusis, pairs of 4-bar phrases, nice piano interludes, and one significantly contrasting section. What original ideas have I got? I do have some. I'm not pinching the whole thing. I like occasionally messing around with the idea of having slightly contrasting time signatures. You've got to be careful with it. If you handle it badly, it can lead to some really uneven sounding music. But I thought I'm going to mess around with changing some 4/4 and 3/4 time signatures. That I was going to also do something slightly quirky with the tonality. So the key signature of my piece and this original one that we looked at here by Ben Hollings is F major, so normal F major scale. What I've done is I've sort of created a modal scale based sort of on the F major scale, so I have flattened the 6th note of the scale, making it a D flat instead of a D, and the 7th note of the scale, making an E flat instead of an E, and it gives me this sounding scale. And you can hear sort of like almost like minory modally twist at the end of the scale, and that then gives me, when I build the triads on that sort of like altered version of the scale, it then gives me a slightly different set of triads. The E flat that I bring in towards the end of the scale, I've also incorporated into my dominant triad at times. So some of the time I've used an E natural in my dominant chord, some of the times an E flat. Let's have a listen to these triads then. I really like that that sort of modal feel. Here are the last 3 triads again. And when you move from the chord 7 to the chord 1, it kind of has almost like a really uplifting feel. I really like that. I've also used quartal harmony as well. So although I've got my triad shapes, I've also used quartal harmony to write some of my writing. And I suppose technically, although I'm claiming this is an original idea, I've actually nicked this from one of the harmony starters. One little thing I want to point out about quartal harmony, and that's this little illustration over here on the right hand side of the screen, is that Quartal harmony obviously means a fourth, but that actually you can flip a fourth on its head to create a fifth as well. And I've again played around with this idea here. So if you take a C and an F, if you flip the two notes around so the F's lower, you then end up with an F and a C, which technically isn't a fourth, it's a fifth, but it's the same interval inverted. And here's another pair. So here is the third bar that I've illustrated here. This is a C and a G, which if you flip, creates a C and a G the other way around. So you got the G and the C first, I should have said, followed by the C and the G first, second, like that. And that's giving it that sort of open quartal harmony. And then what I'd then do is I'd bung all these notes together to make a chord. And you get a quartal sounding chord. And I've done that quite a lot in the piece. So here's a score of my piece. The piece that I borrowed my inspiration from was called First Light. So I've imaginatively entitled this Twilight, except I now realise I can't spell. I spelt the piece name wrong on the score, which is a bit of a dim thing to do. But anyway, I'm nothing if not consistent in my dimness. So this is my intro here, piano intro. So starting with the piano and my Rondo A section. So I'm using what's called a rondo structure, which goes A, B, A1, C, A2. And that gives me two sort of little bits of contrast. So that's what I've done there. So as you can see, 8-bar piano intro. Then here's my anacrusis idea. Look at that. I've used it more even than the piece that I've copied the idea from. This is I've got what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 anacrusis on the very first page of the score. So I've really gone to town with this as an idea. So this is my little anacrusis phrase, and that's the shape of this one, that one there, that one there, and this one's a similar shape as well. It's only these two that are actually slightly different melodic shape, and the one on the bottom line. There you go. So anacrusis, I've gone to town with that idea. I've kept my pairs of 4-bar phrases. So here's my first sort of 4-bar phrase and the second 4-bar phrase there, shown by the green brackets, and that happens again in the next line. Everything that I've highlighted there is quartal. So my opening in the left hand, actually that's fourths inverted to a fifth, and then on top of that we have in the right hand. So I've used that quartal harmony throughout the whole of my piano intro. I've made virtually all of it, apart from a couple of the chords here which are triad based. So I've really exploited that quartal harmony idea. Then I've also used my little change in time signature. So what I've done is I've written the piano intro in 4/4, but then actually the bulk of the main piece is in 3/4. But what I occasionally do is put a 4/4 bar in, and it kind of like stretches out the bar like it's got an extra beat in, or there's almost like a sort of pause feel in it. I really like that musical effect. So that's me being an original composer for once, rather than nicking the whole thing. So that's what I've done with that. Here are a few little development tricks. This is how to squeeze loads of ideas out of one initial starting point. So look, my underlying harmony of all 3 lines, it's essentially the same chord sequence 3 times over. I've not really changed the harmony at all. Same chord pattern. I've used the same chords. I might have in the second 2 lines slightly altered the order of them. So this one here matches with this one here. And then on my way at the end of the line, this one here is this one here, and then I just go back up, borrowing other chords. So it's all the same harmonic material, no alterations to my chords at all, really. Then what I do is I find ways of decoratively developing the little ideas. So you can see my little piano part here, this falling 6th pattern. Here I am in the same bar, in the same pattern in the next line down, but rather than having the chords, I've just separated out the notes as pairs of quavers. So simple, works really, really well. I do that sort of thing all the time, all the way through the piece. And then I make a little melodic copy. So my first pair of 4-bar phrases starts with the pickup and goes to there. The second pair of the 4-bar phrases is more or less the same melody, just slightly decorated. So here's my first 8-bar pattern. Starting my melody on the tonic, finishing on the tonic. Got a little bit of a shape, sort of moving up to a high point in the middle of the phrase and then back down to the tonic again. So what I've then done, my second use of the melody, is slightly ornamented it. I've done that with these little pairs of quavers here, which when you compare it with the first line, they were just straight crotchets here and here. Then what I've done is I've made the second half of the phrase finish on an F again, but I'm finishing on the high F, so it's got more of a sort of sense of climax it's building up, and I've also altered my dynamics to go with it as well. Have a little listen. Same phrase structure, more or less the same notes, slightly decorated and slightly reshaped up the octave at the end. So simple. You don't have to rewrite absolutely every idea, every single phrase or bar. In fact, please don't. So essentially, I have got the same line of music 3 times over, and it all lasts more than a minute because it's at quite a slow tempo. Develop stuff, learn little tricks, recycle good ideas. If an idea sounds good, then use it over and over and over again. Okay? So now what we've got here is my Rondo B section, so contrasting section. This is more or less the first 2 lines of this page, followed by my A1 section at the end of the page. So what have I done here? Well, first thing I've done is that those 2 bars in the little blue shape there are the first 2 bars of First Light. So if you wanted to rewind and look back at the score, I've just nicked them. I've put an accompaniment with it and I've hidden it with the melody over the top, but it's the same 2 bars. No shame in that. If I was to nick like 2 pages, it might be a bit of a problem. But pinching a chord sequence from somewhere is absolutely fine. I mean, damn it all, someone else will have used this chord sequence with these notes somewhere else. They're bound to have. So that's what I've done there, and that's got my next section going. I've also, this is a little piano link that I've nicked from a John Rutter piece. It's a Rutter Requiem. Some of the girls can tell we've sung the Kyrie from this, I think, so you might know it. So here's the first nicked idea. This is the First Light idea, the one at the top of the page. And brass banders who know this piece, you'll recognise that instantly. It is just the first 2 bars, but I've put a nice accompaniment with it and hidden it with a melody. Here is the little piano John Rutter link. This is the one that I've highlighted in the sort of orangey circle. But again, I've sort of like hidden it with a chord over the top and like a clashing pedal note in the bass, and just sort of like, you know, try and disguise it. And that's my B section. Not terribly long, just one. Again, like pairs of 4-bar phrases. And then the last line, plus the little anacrusis here, of course, not forgetting my anacrusis, is the opening cornet phrase, but all rehashed so the piano plays it all. Complete repeat. I've not changed any of it, I don't think. I've just made it all work for the piano. Really easy. That's my A1 section. So back to contrast again. Now, I'm back to the First Light piece. I nicked this idea from First Light. This is a totally contrasting section. So this is sort of brand new. It doesn't look like the rest of the music. It looks different, and that's deliberate, conscious choice. What have I done here then? I've modulated. So the first thing I've done here is it starts off quite conventionally in the relative minor. So I was in F major, this is D minor. But then I've kind of like done a sort of like really funny harmonic shift here. This is a B minor chord here, and there's like a sort of B minor-y feel to a couple of the bars. B minor, D minor, not related to each other. Then back to the D minor pattern, then back to the B minor pattern. So I've got like sort of, you know, pairs of bars here. Alternating. I've altered the piano writing. So I've got this sort of like little rocking quaver pattern, almost an Alberti bass pattern. So that sounds like this. When you're doing those patterns, you've got to be careful with them to make sure that they don't completely meander and wander all over the place. On its own, that sounds a little bit shapeless. You just got to watch those, otherwise you end up writing really sort of like aimless quavers. So keep your shapes perhaps a little bit more rigid than I have done there until you know what you're doing with it. Then I've finished the whole thing off with a sort of 2.5-ish with a big pause on, you see, a bar link, and that's going to get me back to my final section. So that's a sort of little joining link as well. So this is 8 bars of contrast plus a joining link. It's much more dissonant. I've used more dissonance as a deliberate harmonic sort of like stylish sort of change. I've not used so much quartal harmony in this section here. But what I have done is I have used sort of outline of fourths in my melodic shape. So I've got a new melodic shape, and you can see intervals of fourths, D, A, D. The overall shape of this phrase starts in an A, back up to a D, there's a fourth, finishes C, G, C, fourths again. This little descending pattern here descends over the shape of a fourth from a D to an A, and so on and so forth. So although I've not made the harmony quartal, I've used the idea of a fourth interval quite a lot. This is my new melody. And that's my contrasting section. So it has a different feel to it. Then I'm wrapping it up. I'm back to the opening A idea, but with a little alterations here or there as well, and a sort of like an ending to give it a sort of coda feel. It's a rehash again of the opening. So I've gone over the harmony again, rehashed it, slightly tweaked the melody. So the melody before went with the pickup or anacrusis at the end of the previous page into letter F. This goes. So I'm reworking the same melody again. I've used a thing called a Neapolitan chord at the end. I love a good Neapolitan chord. So Neapolitan chord is where you take the second note of the scale, which in F major is a G, and then you flatten it. So you make it G flat, and then you use a G flat triad to create the harmony. So in F major, F triad, second chord would be G minor triad, chord 2, G flat B, sorry, G, B flat D. Here's your Neapolitan chord. There's your F triad. Oh, I love that Neapolitan shift. It sounds great. I've used that a few times in pieces. Probably not terribly original to keep rehashing the same ideas, but hang on a minute, isn't that what I'm trying to get you to do? It sounds good and it works. Okay. And then also I use pauses at the end to drag it out, a rit, longer note values. Lunga means long, if you know your Italian terms. And I'm sort of drawing the whole piece together to create this sort of like concluding idea. So that's my piece. I hope that you can see that I've tried to be fairly economic with all my ideas. I'm trying to practice what I preach to you. I'm telling you all the time, don't have to make it too complicated. You don't have to keep writing brand new ideas all the time. I thought it was really important to show you how you can take something like a quartal harmony progression and you can develop it into a longer piece, but you don't have to keep rewriting everything all the time. Careful rehashing of ideas with occasional contrasting sections to break up the repetition that you've used is how music works. And if you think about virtually every piece we listen to, that's how it works. How many pieces can you name that have a structure that goes section A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Like that, no repetition. It just isn't out there. So hopefully you found this useful. Think really carefully about what you're doing. Make some good decisions at the start of your piece. Be inspired by something else. Develop and repeat material with enough contrast in there to make it interesting. So it's enough wittering. What I think we need to do now is to listen to Grace play the cornet part for us. I'd like to thank Grace very much for doing this. It sounds fantastic. It wasn't easy to play along to my piano part, not just because of my usual piano playing, but because the tempo is quite slow and free. It must have been really hard to count all of this, so she's worked really hard and it sounds great. So have a little listen and then get composing. Good luck, folks.